Hello and welcome to another episode of Buckets. If your first thought hearing that is, this sounds different, or that's a new voice, you'd be correct. My name is Michael Fiddle. I have been a guest on Buckets many of times, but today I am simply sliding over and sitting in the host chair to fill in for the great Sean Little and the GOAT, Matt Moore. We are recording a best bets breakdown for Friday, May 3rd. I am joined by my man AOW, Andrew O'Connor Watts, and we got you guys covered in breaking down two game sixes, which feature teams on the brink of elimination. We have the Cleveland Cavaliers up 3-2, trying to close the deal on the road in Orlando, and the Dallas Mavericks at home up 3-2 against their playoff rival, the LA Clippers. Before we get started, let me remind everybody that Buckets is sponsored by BetMGM, the LeBron, the king of sportsbooks, and you could go download the Action Network app to see everything from every one of our amazing contributors at Action Network. And lastly, if you have not already heard the big breaking news, the WNBA season is right around the corner, and Buckets is spinning off our WNBA episodes to its own feed. They will be hosted by Maria Marino and the rest of our amazing WNBA crew who will be doing their thing. The first episode will be out this Friday for WNBA Buckets. It will actually be linked in the show notes of this very podcast, so be sure to go check that out. And before we start breaking down NBA stuff, I just want to quickly say one thing about WNBA betting. It is a really sharp market. The ratio of money and bettors who are playing into WNBA lines compared to an NBA game or an NFL game, you see a much higher ratio of high-level gamblers and less recreational bettors. So if you want to get in on some WNBA action and listen to Maria's podcast with the rest of her amazing crew, I am sure that you can pick up edges, learn about travel spots, injury reports, and all of those things that really make a difference in WNBA betting. So I will be listening to that podcast pretty regularly, and I highly encourage you guys do it as well. All right, AOW, Andrew O'Connor Watts is my guest today. You could find him on the Action Network app and on Twitter at NBA Watts. My man Watts, let's keep this cadence pretty usual around the buckets. Let's not ruffle any feathers up top. What is your best bet for the Friday, May 3rd NBA playoff slate?
I'm on Cavs Magic under 200.
Okay, I am going to be on Cavaliers +4 against the spread. And I am also going to be escalating that bet with Cavaliers money line +150. And I'm even willing to sell points and play an alt spread of Cavaliers -4 on the road at +215. Watts, you get us started and talk to us about why under in Cavs Magic is a best bet for you.
Yeah, so this is about the two offenses. Was kind of my thing going into this series. It's going to be an ugly, not a lot of scoring kind of series, and we've pretty much seen that play out outside of one game, which was actually in Orlando. But the Cavs in particular actually surprisingly have the worst offensive rating in this playoffs. So they're just a 106.3 offensive rating, about 2 points. I'm sorry, that their best game this series is a 106.3 offensive rating. So that's of all of their offensive performances, that was their best. That is, just for context, about 2 points worse per 100 possession than the Portland Trailblazers this year. So
wow.
Really slow, ugly offense so far. In addition, we know the Magic have a great defense. They have the second best home defense for the regular season. And in the playoffs, their defensive rating is just 92.5, which obviously flip that. The Cavs offensive rating has been 92.5. So we also, another part of it is the Cavs defense is excellent. They had the second best road defense in the regular season. So them being on the road, their defense travels. I think we see two high-level defenses against pretty low-level offense, which leads me to the Magic side of it, because I think, as I mentioned, one of those offensive explosions was by the Magic in game 3, where they scored, I believe, 120 points behind a pretty, just kind of an outlier game there. But I'm looking at Paolo, his efficiency. He dropped 39 points on 24 made field goals last game. Now, Paolo has had 6 games in his career where he scored 35 or more points. And only one time did he take more than 25. All but one game, he had more than 25 field goal attempts. So generally, he's getting these in a not very efficient manner when he is scoring. So even if we see a big game from Paolo, it likely will not be as efficient as we saw last game. Finally, his part of that is because of his home road splits for getting to the free throw line. So on the road, he's getting to the free throw line with 6. He has 6 free throw attempts per game on the road, just 1.5 at home. So that tells me that we're not going to see a lot of scoring. This is also a game 6, which if you listen to yesterday's podcast, we talked about game 6 trends. So game 6 and 7, the under is 130 and 88, 59% hit rate and 15.9% ROI. In game 6 specifically, it's 92 and 66 for 13.1% ROI. So give me the under 200. I like it at this number, but I think you can wait till tip off if you want. You might get a better number, but you're more of the steam expert. So I'm curious what you have thoughts on that part.
Yeah. So I love that last bit of, if you are playing slate and not have bet this total now, it's still an under spot, but it's a wait until pre-tip to play this, because we have seen this little trend developing, whether it be, or a pattern developing for NBA first round totals right now. There has been pretty much unanimous under steam, and this very much applies to this series specifically, but we're also seeing it in Celtics Heat, Lakers Nuggets, Suns Timberwolves, a lot of these series. You are seeing the total open and start to drop rapidly. So I grabbed an under 203.5 right when this line was posted, Andrew, because I knew about those game 6 under trends, and I knew I wanted to beat the initial steam that was going to come in on this line. However, in every game this series, and I expect it to happen for game 6, there has been a late move towards the over where it's ticked up a point or two. That might be buyback action from sharps who grabbed the under 203.5, and now they're flipping it with an over 199.5 and maybe playing back half their original exposure and setting up for a 4-point middle where they are still tilted towards that under direction. That is kind of where I've sensed what is happening in the market. And then that late tick and going up a point or two, that late steam towards the over, is trying to eliminate the sharps from being able to open these buyback windows. So I do believe this is a strong under spot. But within that, I also believe you might be able to wait this out and get a 201, 201.5 that comes in Friday before tip. So I agree it's an under spot. If it's sitting there at 200 before tip, even if it drops to 199.5 before tip, I would still be willing to play it. However, if we look at the weighted outcomes of this, has maybe 2 points to move up still and half a point more that it could possibly move down, there's more wiggle room in waiting and being able to play this towards the under. So AOW, I completely agree on the cap. I like the game 6 trends. I will be with you. I will not be buying back anything on the over because I like the number that I have, but I do think we might see this bounce back up. You have been on the Magic the whole series, which doesn't give me the biggest fears because we've consistently been apart from each other on this Cavaliers. I've been backing the Cavs, and I know it's a dangerous spot to play into a road team that's offense has not traveled, and you are getting smacked on in the mouth in these games, in games 3 and 4 in Orlando. The reason why I am willing to play a Cavaliers +4 has a lot to do with the value around the Jarrett Allen news. I have talked on episodes of Buckets in the past that I believe this Cavaliers Magic series has been the best priced series throughout, whether that be game totals, series lines, series spreads, game spreads individually. This has been a hard market to find a lot of value. And what I've noticed is that those games in Orlando in games 3 and 4 closed as Orlando being a -2.5. So is that +4 an overreaction to them getting smacked in the mouth in those games? Is it a reaction to Jared Allen being out for game 5? He is probable, and the reporting is he's going to try and give it a go with his bruised ribs that he's now gotten 4 or 5 days rest on. So I expect JA to be out there. I expect him to be activated around shoot around tomorrow morning. And I expect this line to go back to 2.5. So therefore, jumping on the +4, jumping on the money line, and even jumping on an alt spread all has the best value now before that line starts to move. And Andrew, the reason why I like alt spreads is because I often talk about key numbers in the NBA, and 5, 6, 7, and 8 are the 4 most common outcomes in an NBA game. So if I can grab a +4 and get these relatively insignificant outcomes on my side of a spread, yes, it's a good grab for the insurance, but I'm also willing to sell it because the outcome likelihood that this game lands 5 or more in either direction is pretty high. So give me the number before 5, 6, 7, and 8. So I'll sell this to -4 or -4.5 and play that nice escalated boosted odds, hoping that the Cavaliers get it done on the road, play with a sense of desperation and urgency, and close the deal. Any thoughts on my cap?
I like it. I lean to the Cavs, I would say. I mean, I'll correct you too. I have not been on the Magic at all this series, actually. I've been Cavs game 1 and 2, and last game laying the points, which did not work out. So 2 and 1 betting the Cavs. But and Magic game game 3 first half. So 3 and 1 on the sides.
So you've nailed this series.
Somewhat, other than last game. Yeah, I got beat up pretty bad in last game because I had the under there as well, and the team total under for the Magic, and so which looked great going into the fourth quarter. They had 70 points. I just needed them to score under 29, basically. But anyways, I think your cap is strong. I mean, the Cavs, I have thought, are the better team this whole time. I mean, I think the Magic have actually outperformed what I thought would happen in this series. I think the Cavs have a little bit of an embarrassment of riches in terms of their roster construction, a lot of overlap with Garland and Mitchell and Mobley and Allen. So I think that the Magic have been able to hang with them for that reason, the reason that it was 2-2 going into last game. I generally agree with your cap, and I think actually that a game that the Cavs being, +4, Cavs -4, Cavs money line, all of that I think plays into the under as well, because I think that what we saw in game 3 was the Magic, who have been the better offense surprisingly in this series, exploding for a lot of points. If the Cavs win, I don't think it's going to be this like crazy barn burner of a game. So I think it bodes well for an under. I like the cap on the side for the Cavs.
Andrew, even before when you said about Paolo's offensive explosion in game 5, like I was watching that game, those were some difficult shots that he made.
Yes.
Some deep threes, which
Yes.
is he's not normally a 3-ball shooter. Some fadeaway 2s looking like a mix between Braun and Dirk Nowitzki. Like he was making very difficult shots, and it was nice to see a young guy step up in the playoffs and kind of outperform his normal expectation. You like to find these guys that get better in these biggest spots. However, I was kind of viewing that as a simple outlier. Let's talk about the Mavericks versus Clippers game. Despite us not having any official best bets on these lines, we can go through the market angle, the leans that we have, kind of ways that we might foresee attacking this. I'll start out and just say that this is another really well-priced game. Now, you often see that when you get to game 6 in a series where we not only have 82 games worth of sample size data, we have 5 games worth of these teams playing each other head to head in a row. We have priced in how much home court advantage should be worth. We have seen these teams play, so we know what matchups are going to try and be exploited. So the prop market is often sharp too. We have no rest advantages, no travel advantages until we could start to bring that in next series when we'll say the Thunder have a rest advantage against which either of these teams makes it out. So I think this is really well priced. We saw it close as Dallas -6.5 or -7 when they were previously in Dallas in game 4 without Kawhi Leonard. We are back in Dallas in game 6, likely without Kawhi Leonard again. And we are now seeing it priced up to -7.5 or 8. Do you think that's an overreaction to the Mavs kind of figuring out the Clippers defense and kind of neutralizing the shooting of Paul George and James Harden? And do you like, does it come back to where it is to 7 or 6.5? Or does it stay right there because this is properly where it should be?
I do think it's an overreaction. I lean to the Clippers here. I don't think we've seen a ton of home court advantage on either side. The Mavericks have been a great road cover this season.
Luka loves to be the enemy too.
Exactly. And the Clippers, I mean, we know that's basically the Lakers stadium, right? So, or the Lakers arena. You don't see this massive home court advantage with either of these teams. And I do think that there were some questionable things with the Clippers. I hate to question coaching because obviously all of these coaches are 10 times, if not more, smarter than I am from a basketball sense. But, we saw things like putting Russ in the corner in the PJ Tucker spot where you literally have PJ Tucker, guys, and he hasn't played all playoffs. And then you put Russ in his spot and PJ. So it's little things like that where I just don't understand why you're putting someone like Russ in a position where he's not going to succeed. And I don't know if this is just kind of throwing everything at the wall and seeing what sticks. But I do lean to the Clippers. The thing keeping me off it a little bit is the status of Terrence Mann. I think Terrence Mann is a really important piece for them now, especially with Kawhi out of the game and out of the series. I think you have to assume he's not playing in the series, and you got to kind of cap it from there. But I lean to the Clippers. I think Ty Lue's a great coach when it comes to making game-to-game adjustments, and I do think he'll make some adjustments. I mean, I have thoughts on the total as well, but if you want to kind of respond to the sides, we can go from there for now.
Yeah, I think it's just really well priced. I'll keep saying it.
Yeah.
I think there's been very little action that's come in on either side from smart handicappers who are line movers in these spaces. That's why we're seeing it stay pretty flat there. You look at betting splits available on various websites. 52% of the bets on LA, 52% of the money on Dallas. There's really nothing to read into that because they're more or less hovering around the same portion. The book, as long as nothing middles and they're not going to open up a middle window, then they're going to make their, 5% on every bet and cover that with vig money. So the books are really even saying, we don't want to take a stand in this game either. We don't want to be stuck with more money and a stronger handle on the other side. I'll mention the total quickly too, Andrew. I was on the under 209.5 for game 5. It was one of the worst beats I've had in the, thank you. We're together, brother. It was one of the worst beats that we've had for the entire season. It was 73-50 with 4 minutes left in the third quarter. And then they scored 93 points in the next 16 minutes. They averaged a point every 6 seconds for the rest of the game. They essentially played in a blowout Phoenix Suns 7 seconds or less basketball on both sides and shot at a 50% clip in doing that. It was a brutal beat to take in a series that's been so slow and in a game that's a 20-point blowout where you expect the pace to dip. You don't have to
Right.
worry about late game fouling. You can say the last minute is burned because they're going to dribble out the clock and let it go to shot clock violations and not even attempt extra shots. So to lose that was brutal. And the market came out and said, we understand. That was a brutal bad beat that we are not going to overreact to. That essentially was a game that finished as an under. Even though it ended up going 7 points to the over, it is now
Exactly.
3 points lower in the line than what it was last game. That is a loud indicator that this is still a potential under spot. It is, again, a game 6 where you might want to play into that 59% against the spread under, 15.6% ROI that you said. Give me your thoughts on the total. I have not bet anything yet, but to me, it feels like under or nothing.
Yeah, I'm 100%, man. Great podcasting, just in full agreement. I'm the same. I was actually the only silver lining for me about seeing that game go over like it did was, all right, great. I get to bet the under next game with even more power and force and confidence. And then of course it opens, I think 207.5. And I was like, okay, I all right, we can work with that, but not, not where I wanted. I was hoping it would maybe rise a little bit. 207.5, fine. We get some Terrence Mann news. That makes me not as interested in an under. He's a great defensive player. Someone that can kind of bother Kyrie, and as much as one can bother Kyrie. And then it moved to 206, and I'm pretty much out at 206. So I think if it does get back up to 207.5, 208 preferably, and we get Terrence Mann in, I will like the under, but I do not think that we're going to get that. So yeah, at this point, I don't really want any part of it. It's under or nothing for sure, though. In agreement there.
Yeah, totally on the same page. The one I'm probably going to be no bets going into this game, but I'd say if you are kind of interested in getting some of these close out game narrative type of bets, there would be an interesting way to like try and I hate the SGP. So it is a rare moment for me to even start recommending. I'm not recommending, but even talking about one. But if you wanted to go down 10 toes down and sink your teeth in to the Luka is going to be a monster in a closeout game. He looked way better. The illness is going to be behind him. Hopefully the knee feels a little better. The combination of Mavs money line, Luka over on his points, and the Clippers under on their team total seems like a narrative. Luka's just going to get it done on his home court and send the Clippers finally packing. Although everyone thinks Luka's beaten the Clippers 16 times in series so far, he's actually 0 for 2 and hoping to get over the hump this time. So I actually think Luka does it, and he might have a dominant performance in doing so.
Yeah, I like those. I never bet, not never, but I rarely bet the same game parlays, but I'm not opposed to them when it's something like that where it actually makes sense. I mean, betting, for instance, like with the Lakers, D'Lo over 16 points, Lakers to cover. That something like that where they're actually correlated results. Like, yeah, you are getting a little bit of a diminished return and maybe how likely that outcome is. But what I like about this same game parlays like those is that it allows you to limit your exposure while still following a certain narrative. Like if this team covers, it's because of X, Y, or Z, right? And that allows you to, if you're not totally sure about a team covering or winning or whatever it is, it allows you to kind of play it for less in a situation like that, with a roadmap, so to speak. So like last season, I did, Booker and KD points over in their series against the Nuggets because all they had was Booker and KD. So I played a points over for Booker and KD, Suns money line for like plus 600. And that allowed me to say, look, I don't really think the Suns are going to take this, but if they do, here's how it happens. And I can bet, very small amount to win a large amount. So that's a more general SGP discussion, but long story short, I think, playing that Luka over Mavs money line or Mavs spread, however you want to play it, I think, you gotta lean into those angles, and here's the roadmap kind of approach to the same game parlay.
Watts, I like that you talked about the pricing because everything is a number or a team with an associated price. So if I was looking at a parlay like that, you mentioned a 6-1 payout when you did it for the Suns.
Yeah.
A 3-leg parlay has 8 possible outcome combinations. So the amount that you should return, like if the sportsbook charged nothing for it, is 7-1. So I was exactly going to say, if I were going to pair these 3 legs together, based on the correlated values, I would want at least 5.5 or 6-1. So I think you're spot on in throwing out that price tag. The last thing that I want to hit before we get out of here is we just predicted both teams, the Cavaliers and the Mavericks, to close out their series, which means you would get a Cavaliers versus Celtics and a Mavericks versus Thunder game 1s of round 2s. Is there any number or angle or thought you're having about jumping on opening lines as soon as these games end and when we get those prices? Because we will not have Buckets episodes immediate in response. There might be a live show where we can react to the opening lines, and definitely come join us on Buckets Live. But I just know off the bat, I went back and looked at Celtics Cavaliers previous pricing. Of course, we're not going to have Porzingis. He's been announced as out through the entire series. We'll have to see if Jared Allen ends up playing in game 6 and what his status is, but I would assume he's good to go by game 1 in Boston. My first thought is if you get anything with Boston sub 7 or 7.5, I would want the Boston Celtics side immediately at the opening line.
Yeah, I mean, if that's what they're throwing out there, yes, Boston at home, under 7, absolutely. I would take that. I think the Cavs, like we said, they are a talented roster, but they're not the best constructed roster. That is not the case with the Celtics. They're an extremely talented roster and extremely well constructed. So I just don't think that they're even in the same class, really. The fact that the Magic, who are, I'm not trying to diminish the Magic, by the way, because this is one of my favorite teams this year. I've been on here before. The Magic at home was like an auto best bet for me throughout the season. It's a great spot, but they're just not as built for the playoffs. And I kind of feel like the Cavs are just a slightly better version of the Magic. Slightly more built for the playoffs because of Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland, but they are nothing. They're not in the same league as the Boston Celtics. I think I would be shocked if it was a 7, even without Kristaps Porzingis. So I'll be all over that if that's what we get.
Yeah, I think it's going to come out right around 7, 7.5. They haven't played since the Cavaliers had that crazy comeback against them and ended up like having a 20-point comeback and win. So hopefully that'll be burned into the brains of some Boston backers so we can still back the Celtics at a good number. In terms of the Thunder versus a potential Maverick series, that's really going to be one where I'm going to wait it out and see, and probably even watch the market move a little bit, potentially even wait for a first game to see how that moves. I would really like to look into Gafford versus Chet props. We will get into all of that next series. I don't really have a read on the opening line. The reason why I prefer to take the Boston side and skip the Thunder side is because now the Mavericks are home, right? So they'd be home through this little stretch. The Cavaliers went game 4 in Orlando, game 5 back in Cleveland, now game 6 back in Orlando, then potentially game 1 in Boston, or potentially coming home for game 7. There's just been so much travel in the Cavaliers aspect of it. So that's what I'm picking off going into round 2. My man Watts, thank you as always for joining me and helping me through my first ever time hosting an episode of Buckets. You could find Watts at NBA Watts. You could even measure the energy in this Zoom call in Watts. You can find me at Fiddle's Picks. You should listen to all things Buckets throughout the weekend. Check out Buckets live shows. Thank you to David Payne and Tito for helping produce and get us together. Thank you guys for listening. And as always, peace out.